Have you ever looked at someone and thought you knew their entire story just by their appearance? Have you ever made a judgment so quick, so automatic, that you didn't even realize you were doing it? I have. And years ago, one moment, one encounter with a kid in torn shoes walking into my bank, shattered everything I thought I knew about people, about success, about dignity, and about myself. What I'm about to share with you changed me in ways I never imagined possible. And I need to tell you this story because maybe, just maybe, it will change something in you too. My name is Sarah, and I was a bank manager. Not just any bank manager, mind you. I was the kind of person who prided myself on being professional, efficient, and successful. I wore expensive suits, carried designer bags, and had worked my way up from a teller position to managing one of the most prestigious branches in the city. I thought I had it all figured out. I thought I understood people, understood success, understood what it took to make it in this world. But I was so wrong. So devastatingly, painfully wrong. It was a Tuesday morning, the kind of morning where everything seems ordinary, predictable, routine. The sun was streaming through the tall glass windows of our bank, casting long shadows across the marble floors that I had always found so impressive, so symbolic of stability and prosperity. The air conditioning hummed quietly, maintaining that perfect professional temperature that made our clients feel comfortable as they discussed their investments, their mortgages, their financial futures. I remember standing near my office door, holding my third coffee of the morning, reviewing some loan applications on my tablet, feeling that familiar sense of control and competence that came with my position. The morning rush had died down, and we were in that quiet period before lunch when things usually slowed down. My team was working efficiently at their stations, helping the few customers who had trickled in. Everything was normal. Everything was exactly as it should be. And then the door opened. I heard it before I saw him, that distinctive sound of the heavy glass door swinging open, followed by footsteps that seemed different somehow, uncertain, hesitant. I looked up, and that's when I saw him. A kid. Couldn't have been more than 16 or 17 years old, walking into our pristine bank with shoes that were literally falling apart. I'm not exaggerating when I say torn shoes. The sole of his right shoe was separating from the upper part, flapping slightly with each step he took. His left shoe had a visible hole near the toe. His jeans were clean, but worn thin in places, faded from countless washings, and his t-shirt, though also clean, had seen better days. His hair needed cutting, and he carried an old backpack that looked like it had been through a war. But it was his face that I remember most clearly, those eyes. They were a striking shade of brown, alert and intelligent, but there was something else there too, a mixture of determination and vulnerability, hope and fear, courage and uncertainty. He looked around the bank with an expression that I would later understand was not intimidation or discomfort, but rather a kind of wonder, as if he was seeing something significant, something meaningful, something that represented more than just a building with money in it. And what did I do in that moment? What was my immediate reaction to seeing this young man walk into my bank? I'm ashamed to admit it now, but I need to be honest with you. I need to tell you the truth about who I was back then, because only by acknowledging our worst moments can we truly appreciate how much we can grow, how much we can change. My first thought, my very first instinct, was suspicion, not curiosity, not compassion, not even neutral interest. Suspicion. I found myself tensing up, my grip tightening on my tablet. I saw one of my tellers, Monica, glance at me with raised eyebrows, a look that said what we were both thinking but would never say out loud in our diversity-trained, politically correct workplace. I saw another employee, Derek, subtly position himself where he could keep an eye on this unexpected visitor. And I, the manager, the leader, the person who should have set a better example, I started walking toward the front of the bank with my professional smile plastered on my face, but with my guard completely up. Every prejudice I didn't know I had, every unconscious bias I would have denied possessing, every ugly assumption I thought I was too educated and enlightened to make, they all came flooding to the surface in that instant. I assumed he was there to open a basic account with whatever little money he might have saved, or maybe he was lost and looking for directions, or perhaps, and this thought makes me sick to remember now, perhaps he was there for something less innocent. These thoughts flashed through my mind in seconds, automatic and ugly, rooted in biases I didn't even know I was carrying around. I had become exactly the kind of person I would have condemned if I had seen these thoughts in someone else. The irony was that I considered myself progressive, open-minded, fair. I had sat through countless workplace seminars on inclusion and diversity. I had nodded along to presentations about unconscious bias. I had even participated in discussions about how we shouldn't judge people by their appearance. But when it came down to it, when a real human being walked into my bank looking different from my usual clients, all of that training, all of those good intentions, they evaporated like morning dew under a harsh sun. This is the part of the story that's hardest to tell, but it's also the most important part because it's the truth. It's the truth about who I was, and maybe it's a truth that some of you watching this can relate to. Maybe you've had similar thoughts, similar reactions, similar moments where you realize that you weren't quite as open-minded as you believed yourself to be. And if you have, I want you to know that sharing this story isn't about making you feel guilty. It's about showing you what I learned, about showing you that change is possible, that growth is possible, that we can become better versions of ourselves if we're willing to confront the uncomfortable truths about who we are. The young man approached the information desk where Monica was sitting, and I positioned myself nearby, close enough to intervene if needed but far enough to appear casual. I watched as he carefully took off his backpack, handling it with a tenderness that seemed odd for such a worn item. He cleared his throat, and when he spoke, his voice was quiet but clear, respectful but not servile, the voice of someone who had practiced what he was going to say. He asked to speak with someone about opening a business account. A business account. Those words hung in the air for a moment, and I saw Monica's face register surprise before she recovered her professional composure. I felt my own eyebrows rise before I could stop them. A business account. This kid in torn shoes wanted to open a business account. My skepticism doubled. Was this some kind of joke? Was he confused about what type of account he actually needed? Was he trying to impress someone? I stepped forward, my professional mask firmly in place, and introduced myself as the branch manager. I told him I would be happy to help him understand our different account options, emphasizing the word understand in a way that now makes me cringe, as if he needed special help comprehending basic banking concepts. He looked directly at me with those intelligent brown eyes and said, with a politeness that bordered on formal, that yes, he understood the different account types, and yes, he specifically needed a business checking account with the ability to accept merchant payments and issue business debit cards. He spoke with such specificity, such clarity, that I felt my assumptions beginning to crack, just slightly. This wasn't the confused request of someone who didn't know what they needed. This was specific. This was researched. This was intentional. But I wasn't ready to let go of my prejudices yet. Oh no, I had built them too carefully, too completely to abandon them based on one articulate sentence. Instead, I found myself doing something that now fills me with deep shame. I started gently, condescendingly suggesting that perhaps he might want to start with a personal checking account first, build up some banking history, understand how financial institutions work. I used my softest, most patient voice, the voice I might use with a child who didn't understand something simple. I was being kind, or so I told myself. I was being helpful. I was guiding him toward more appropriate options. But what I was really doing was refusing to take him seriously, refusing to see him as he actually was, refusing to look past those torn shoes and worn clothes to the person standing in front of me. He listened to my entire speech with remarkable patience, nodding occasionally, never interrupting, never showing frustration or anger. When I finally finished, he simply said that he appreciated my concern, but he had done extensive research on business accounts, had consulted with a mentor who advised him on what he would need, and he was certain that a business checking account was the right choice for his situation. There was something in the way he said it, a quiet confidence that didn't come from arrogance but from knowledge, from preparation, from genuine understanding. For the first time since he walked in, I felt a flicker of real curiosity breaking through my wall of prejudice. Who was this kid? What was his story? What business was he planning to start? I found myself actually wanting to know, actually becoming interested in him as a person, rather than as a category, as an assumption, as a judgment. I invited him to my office, and as we walked across that marble floor, I became acutely aware of the sound his torn shoes made, a slight scuffing sound that seemed amplified in the quiet bank. I saw my employees watching, their expressions carefully neutral, but their curiosity obvious. I saw a well-dressed businessman client glance at us as we passed, his expression one of mild confusion, probably wondering why the manager was personally attending to someone who looked like they had just come from a very different world than the one we usually catered to. We sat down in my office, him in one of the comfortable leather chairs I had spent considerable time selecting, me behind my large mahogany desk that had always made me feel powerful and in control. He carefully placed his backpack on the floor next to him, and I noticed how he sat up straight, his posture perfect, his attention completely focused. I pulled up the business account application on my computer and began asking the standard questions, still half expecting this to fall apart, still waiting for the moment when it would become clear that this was all some kind of misunderstanding. What was the nature of his business? And this is where everything changed. This is where my entire world began to shift on its axis. This is where I started to understand just how wrong I had been about everything. He told me he had been developing a mobile application for the past 18 months, not playing with some simple app builder, but actually coding, actually programming, actually creating something from scratch. He explained it in terms that demonstrated real technical knowledge, real understanding of software development, real expertise in his field. The application, he said, was designed to help students from low-income backgrounds navigate the college application process, find scholarships, understand financial aid options, and connect with mentors who had successfully made the journey from poverty to higher education. It was nearly complete, he told me, with a beta version already being tested by guidance counselors at several high schools in underserved communities. He had interest from 2 different investors, preliminary discussions with 3 nonprofit organizations that wanted to partner with him, and projections suggesting that within the first year, the app could help over 10,000 students. As he spoke, pulling papers from his backpack to show me, I felt something crumbling inside me. Not just my assumptions about him, but my assumptions about myself, about my judgment, about my ability to see people clearly. These weren't vague dreams or hopeful fantasies. These were concrete plans, detailed projections, actual commitments from real organizations. He showed me letters of intent from potential partners. He showed me testimonials from the beta testers. He showed me a business plan that was more thorough and professional than many I had seen from people 3 times his age with fancy business degrees and expensive consultants. His hand shook slightly as he laid out the documents on my desk, and I realized it wasn't from nervousness about the business itself. It was from the effort of maintaining his composure, of staying professional and focused despite walking into a place where he clearly knew he would be judged, where he knew his appearance would speak louder than his accomplishments, where he understood that people like me would look at his shoes before they listened to his words. And he had been right. I had done exactly that. I had looked at his shoes, at his clothes, at his age, at everything except what actually mattered. I had seen the outside and assumed I knew the inside. I had judged the cover and never even considered that there might be an extraordinary book beneath it. Have you ever had a moment where you suddenly see yourself clearly, where all the self-deceptions and comfortable lies you tell yourself just fall away, and you're forced to confront who you actually are rather than who you think you are? That was happening to me in that moment, sitting in my expensive office chair, wearing my designer suit, looking at this remarkable young man with torn shoes who had accomplished more with less than I could even imagine. I felt my throat tighten with emotion I wasn't prepared for. Shame, yes, but also something else. Awe, respect, a recognition that I was in the presence of someone truly special, someone whose determination and brilliance had overcome obstacles I had never faced, someone who had every reason to be bitter and angry about the inequality and injustice of the world, but had instead chosen to build something that would help others facing similar challenges. I asked him, my voice softer now, genuinely curious rather than skeptical, how he had taught himself to code. His answer was simple but devastating. The public library. He had spent countless hours at the public library, using their computers because he didn't have one at home, watching free online tutorials, reading documentation, practicing on free coding platforms, building his skills one painstaking step at a time. When the library closed, he would go to a fast food restaurant that had free Wi-Fi and sit there with a notebook, handwriting code that he would later type in when he could access a computer again. Handwriting code. I sat there thinking about how I had complained just last week when my home internet was slow for an hour, and this young man had been handwriting computer code in notebooks because he couldn't always access a computer. The contrast was so stark, so painful, that I felt tears actually threatening to form in my eyes, which never happened at work, never happened in professional situations. I asked about his family, and he told me quietly that he lived with his grandmother in a small apartment. His mother had passed away when he was 12. His father had never been in the picture, and his grandmother, who worked as a housekeeper, was getting older and struggling with health issues. He was 17, still in high school, still getting straight as he mentioned casually, as if that wasn't remarkable enough on its own, while also building this application, while also planning this business, while also trying to find a way to lift himself and his grandmother out of poverty. And his shoes. I had to ask about his shoes because they had been my first judgment, my first assumption, my first evidence that he didn't belong in my bank. He looked down at them, and for the first time I saw a flicker of embarrassment cross his face. He said they were the only pair he had. He had been saving every penny for the business registration fees, for the legal consultations he needed, for the initial marketing budget. Shoes, he said with a slight smile that broke my heart, could wait. The business couldn't. In that moment, sitting across from this extraordinary young man, I understood something profound about privilege, about opportunity, about the invisible advantages I had carried my entire life without even recognizing them. I had never had to choose between shoes and dreams. I had never had to handwrite code in notebooks because I couldn't afford a computer. I had never had to build something world-changing while also trying to make sure my grandmother had enough money for her medications. I had walked through life with doors opening for me, with people taking me seriously, with resources available whenever I needed them, and I had convinced myself that my success was purely the result of my hard work, my intelligence, my determination. But sitting across from someone who had worked infinitely harder, who had demonstrated far more intelligence and determination than I ever had, someone who had done all of that without any of the advantages I had taken for granted, I saw the truth. Success wasn't just about hard work. It was about opportunity. It was about access. It was about people giving you a chance, taking you seriously, seeing your potential, rather than your appearance. And I realized that I had nearly failed this test. I had nearly sent him away with condescending advice about starting with a personal checking account. I had nearly let my prejudices rob him of the professional service he deserved, rob me of the opportunity to be part of something meaningful, rob my bank of the chance to support someone truly remarkable. I felt something shift inside me, something fundamental and permanent. This wasn't just about opening a business account anymore. This was about choosing what kind of person I wanted to be, what kind of world I wanted to live in, what kind of change I wanted to see. I made a decision in that moment that went against every standard protocol we had. I told him that not only would I personally ensure his business account was opened with the features he needed, but I was going to talk to our regional director about a small business development program specifically for young entrepreneurs from underserved communities. I told him that his story, his determination, his brilliance needed to be supported, needed to be celebrated, needed to be amplified. I asked if he would be willing to let me connect him with some of our business clients who had backgrounds in technology and might be willing to mentor him, to open doors, to provide guidance. His eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw that careful composure crack just slightly. His voice was thick with emotion when he said yes, when he thanked me in a way that suggested he wasn't used to people actually helping him, actually believing in him, actually seeing past his circumstances to his potential. We spent the next hour going through every detail of his business account, but more than that, we talked, really talked. He told me about his dreams, not just for his business, but for his life. He wanted to graduate from high school, get a full scholarship to college because his grandmother couldn't afford tuition, study computer science, and eventually start a technology company that would focus on creating solutions for problems faced by low-income communities. He wanted to prove that brilliance and potential existed everywhere, not just in privileged zip codes and expensive schools. He wanted to show kids like him that their circumstances didn't have to define their futures. And I found myself telling him things I rarely shared, about my own journey, about moments in my career where someone had given me a chance, had believed in me, had opened a door that changed everything. I told him about the mentor I had early in my banking career who saw potential in me when I was just a teller with big dreams. I told him how that one person's belief in me had changed the trajectory of my entire life. And I told him that I wanted to be that person for him, that I wanted to do for him what had been done for me, that I wanted to pay forward the kindness and belief that had been invested in me. But even as I said these things, I was haunted by the knowledge that I had almost not done any of this. I had almost let my prejudices win. I had almost sent him away. I had almost looked at torn shoes and never seen the brilliant mind, the compassionate heart, the determined spirit wearing them. What if he had walked into a different bank, with a different manager, someone who hadn't had their moment of awakening? What if he had been turned away, discouraged, made to feel like his dreams were foolish, like he didn't belong in the world of business and success? How many brilliant minds, how many world-changing ideas, how many remarkable people are we collectively dismissing, overlooking, underestimating because we can't see past surface appearances, because we let our prejudices and assumptions blind us to the extraordinary potential that exists in every human being? Before he left my office that day, before we walked back out into the main banking area where my employees were trying not to stare, before he headed back out into a world that would continue to judge him by his shoes rather than his character, I did something impulsive. I opened my desk drawer, pulled out my personal checkbook, and wrote him a check. Not from the bank, not from any professional fund or program, but from me personally. It wasn't a huge amount, but it was enough to buy good shoes, maybe some decent clothes for business meetings, maybe cover some of the expenses he had been sacrificing for. When I handed it to him, he stared at it for a long moment and then looked up at me with tears actually running down his face. He tried to refuse it, tried to say he couldn't accept charity, tried to maintain that pride and dignity that had carried him this far. But I insisted. I told him it wasn't charity. I told him it was an investment, and I expected him to pay it forward someday when he was successful, when he was in a position to help someone else, when he saw someone being judged unfairly and had the power to do something about it. He took the check with shaking hands and then did something that absolutely destroyed me. He stood up and hugged me. This young man who had walked into my bank expecting nothing, expecting to be judged and dismissed and treated as less than, he hugged me with such genuine gratitude and relief that I felt tears finally escape from my own eyes, not caring that I was in my office where anyone walking by could see, not caring that I was the manager who was supposed to maintain professional composure at all times. We walked out of my office together, and I made sure everyone in the bank saw us. I made sure my employees witnessed me treating him with respect, with dignity, with the attention and care we would give any important client. I introduced him by name to several staff members, mentioned casually that he was starting an impressive technology business, asked them to ensure his account setup went smoothly. I saw their expressions change, saw the assumptions on their faces shift, saw them recognize their own judgments and prejudices. Later, I found out that Monica, the teller who had first helped him, sought him out before he left and apologized for her initial reaction, for the surprise she hadn't quite hidden when he asked about a business account. She told him she was ashamed of herself, that he had taught her an important lesson about not judging people, and she wished him tremendous success. That meant something. That told me the impact of this encounter was rippling outward, that the lesson I was learning was being shared, that maybe we were all becoming slightly better versions of ourselves. After he left, after those torn shoes walked back out the door, carrying a young man whose life was about to change, carrying someone who now had not just a business account, but connections and support and belief from people who had the power to help him succeed, I called an impromptu staff meeting. I didn't tell them his name or share details that might embarrass him, but I talked about what had happened. I talked about my own prejudices, my own shameful initial assumptions. I talked about how close I had come to failing someone remarkable. I talked about how we, as a bank, as individuals, as human beings, needed to do better. We needed to see people, really see them, not just their clothes or their car or their address or any of the superficial markers we use to categorize and judge. We needed to remember that brilliance, determination, and worthiness aren't visible on the outside. They're qualities of character, of spirit, of potential, that can only be seen if we actually look, if we actually care enough to see past our automatic assumptions and prejudices. Some of my employees nodded thoughtfully. Some looked uncomfortable, confronted with their own biases. Some shared their own stories of times they had been judged unfairly, or times they had judged others and regretted it. It was an honest, uncomfortable, necessary conversation, the kind we should have more often but rarely do, because it requires admitting our own flaws, our own failures, our own capacity for unfairness. Have you ever experienced something that made you question everything you thought you knew about people? Have you ever had your assumptions completely shattered? Comment below and share your story because I think we all need to hear these stories. Need to be reminded that we don't know someone's journey just by looking at them. Need to keep ourselves humble and open to being surprised by the remarkable people we might otherwise overlook. The weeks that followed that encounter changed more than just my perspective. They changed my entire approach to my job, my career, my life. I became obsessed, in a good way, with the question of how many other remarkable people we were missing, how many other individuals with extraordinary potential we were overlooking because they didn't fit our narrow definitions of what success and talent looked like. I started a program at my bank, worked with our regional director to create a small business support initiative specifically targeting young entrepreneurs from underserved communities. We allocated funds for mentorship programs, for reduced-fee business accounts, for connections with local business leaders who could provide guidance and opportunities. I used my own networks, reached out to successful business owners I had worked with over the years, and created a volunteer mentor program. Some of these business leaders were skeptical at first. They questioned whether young people from difficult backgrounds would be serious enough, committed enough, knowledgeable enough. They asked if this was just feel-good charity that wouldn't produce real results. I understood their skepticism because I had felt it myself not long ago. But I told them about the young man with torn shoes, about his brilliance and determination, about how wrong I had been to judge him. I asked them to give these young entrepreneurs the same chance I had almost failed to give, to look past appearances and circumstances to see the potential, the drive, the dreams. And they agreed. One by one, successful entrepreneurs, business owners, professionals from various fields agreed to participate, to mentor, to provide guidance and support. Within 3 months, we had connected 15 young entrepreneurs from low-income backgrounds with mentors and resources. Within 6 months, 5 of them had successfully launched their businesses. Within a year, 2 had attracted actual investment capital. And the young man with torn shoes? His story became the most remarkable of all. His application launched 6 months after our meeting, and it became exactly what he had envisioned. Students from underserved communities started using it to navigate the complex college application process. The testimonials that came in were heartbreaking and beautiful. Kids who thought college was impossible for them found pathways forward. Students who had no idea how to apply for financial aid discovered opportunities they never knew existed. Young people who felt lost and hopeless found direction and support. One of the nonprofit organizations he had partnered with featured him in their annual fundraising campaign. A local news station did a story about his app and his journey. A technology company offered him an internship that accommodated his high school schedule. And yes, he got a full scholarship to one of the top universities in the country for computer science. But what meant the most to me, what still brings tears to my eyes when I think about it, was when he came back to the bank about a year after that first visit. He walked through the same door, but this time, he was wearing good shoes. Not expensive shoes, not designer shoes, but good, solid, respectable shoes that fit properly and didn't have any holes. He was wearing nice clothes, carrying a professional-looking bag, walking with confidence that came not from arrogance, but from knowing his worth, from having been seen and valued and supported. He asked to see me, and when I came out, he gave me the biggest smile and told me he had something for me. It was a check, the exact amount I had given him a year earlier. He had kept his promise. He was paying it back even though I had told him it was a gift, even though he certainly could have used that money for 100 other things. But he insisted. He said he wanted to pay it back so I could give it to someone else who needed it, so I could help another person the way I had helped him, so the kindness could keep moving forward. And then he told me something that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. He said that what had meant even more than the money, even more than the connections and support, was simply being seen, being treated with dignity and respect, having someone believe in him when he walked in looking like he didn't belong. He said there had been other banks before mine, other places he had tried to start his business journey, and he had been turned away, dismissed, made to feel like his dreams were foolish because of how he looked, because of where he came from. He had almost given up. He had almost convinced himself that maybe everyone else was right, that maybe he was aiming too high, that maybe people like him weren't meant for business ownership and success. But then, he walked into my bank, and yes, I had judged him initially, but then I had looked past my prejudices. I had seen him. I had believed in him. I had treated him like he mattered, and that, he said, had made all the difference. I'm not telling you this story to make myself look good. I'm telling you this story to show you how close I came to failing, how close I came to being just another obstacle in this remarkable young man's path. I'm telling you because I want you to understand that our prejudices, our assumptions, our quick judgments, they have real consequences. They don't just hurt our own souls by making us smaller, meaner, less compassionate people. They actually harm others. They close doors. They crush dreams. They tell people that they don't matter, that they aren't worthy, that they should stay in their place. And we do this casually, automatically, often without even realizing we're doing it. We look at someone's clothes, their car, their address, their accent, their age, and we think we know their story. We think we know their potential. We think we know what they're capable of achieving. But we're wrong. We're so often wrong. Because brilliance doesn't announce itself with designer labels. Determination doesn't drive a luxury car. Potential doesn't live in the right zip code. These qualities exist everywhere, in everyone, waiting for someone to actually see them, to actually believe in them, to actually provide the opportunity for them to flourish. After that young man left my office that second time, after I held his repaid check in my hands and cried tears that were equal parts shame and joy, I made another decision. I started speaking at banking conferences, at business events, at community meetings. I told this story over and over, sharing my shame and my learning and my transformation. Some people listened thoughtfully. Some dismissed me as being too emotional, too politically correct, too focused on feelings rather than business. But some people got it. Some people had their own stories of being judged, or of judging others. Some people started their own initiatives, their own programs, their own commitments to seeing people rather than assumptions. The ripple effects continued to spread. The young entrepreneurs we helped started mentoring others. The business leaders who volunteered as mentors found the experience so rewarding that they became advocates for supporting underserved communities. My own employees started approaching their work differently, treating every customer with genuine respect and attention regardless of appearance. And I changed most of all. I became hyper-aware of my own biases and prejudices. I started catching myself when I made quick judgments. I forced myself to pause to actually interact with people before deciding who they were and what they were capable of. I became, slowly and imperfectly, a better person. Not perfect. I still catch myself making assumptions sometimes. I still have biases I'm working to overcome. But I'm aware now. I'm trying. And most importantly, I know that every person who walks through my door, who sits across from my desk, who asks for help or service or support, they deserve to be seen. Really seen. Not categorized, not judged, not dismissed based on superficial appearances, but actually seen for who they are and what they might become. Do you know what's really interesting? That young man's application, the one he built to help students from low-income backgrounds navigate college applications, it now helps over 50,000 students every year. 50,000 young people who might otherwise have given up on their dreams of higher education are getting support, guidance, and resources because one determined kid refused to let poverty and prejudice stop him. Because one bank manager almost failed him but caught herself in time. Because a moment of connection happened that changed multiple lives. And here's the truly beautiful part. Several of those 50,000 students have gone on to start their own ventures, their own businesses, their own initiatives to help others. The young man who walked into my bank with torn shoes, he didn't just change his own life. He didn't just build a successful business. He created a movement, a ripple effect of opportunity and hope that continues to spread. And I got to be a small part of that, not because I was heroic or exceptional, but because I managed, barely, to overcome my own prejudices long enough to see what was right in front of me. That's what I think about now whenever I see someone who doesn't fit the usual profile of success. Whenever someone walks in who looks out of place or different or unexpected, I think about torn shoes and brilliant minds. I think about how close I came to failing someone remarkable. I think about the enormous potential that exists in every human being if we just give them a chance, if we just see them, if we just believe that they matter. So here's what I want you to take away from this story. Here's the lesson that has become the guiding principle of my life and career. Every single person you encounter, no matter what they look like, no matter where they come from, no matter how they're dressed or what car they drive or what address they live at, Every single person deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. Not because it makes you a good person, though it does. Not because it's the right thing to do, though it is. But because you never know who you're actually talking to. You never know what dreams they're carrying, what battles they're fighting, what brilliance they possess that isn't visible on the outside. That person in the worn clothes might be the next great entrepreneur. That kid who looks out of place might have the solution to problems you didn't even know existed. That individual you're tempted to dismiss might be someone extraordinary, someone remarkable, someone who will change the world if we just give them the chance to do so. And even if they're not, even if they're just an ordinary person trying to get through an ordinary day, they still deserve to be treated like they matter. Because they do matter. Every person matters. Every story matters. Every dream matters. We live in a world that constantly tells us to categorize people, to make quick judgments, to decide in seconds who is worth our time and attention and who isn't. We're taught to look for the markers of success and importance. We're trained to give preferential treatment to those who already have advantages while dismissing those who don't. But what if we stopped doing that? What if we actively fought against those instincts? What if we made the conscious decision to see every person who crosses our path as someone worthy of respect, attention, and care? How many brilliant minds would we discover? How many world-changing ideas would we support? How many lives would we positively impact? And beyond the practical outcomes, beyond the success stories and the feel-good moments, there's something even more important. We would become better people. We would create a better world. We would build a society where opportunity is based on potential and effort rather than privilege and appearance. We would demonstrate that we actually believe in the fundamental human dignity that we claim to value. I often wonder what would have happened if I had sent that young man away that day. What if I had let my prejudices win? What if I had gently steered him toward a personal checking account and never learned his story? What if I had failed the test that life was giving me? His app might never have been built. Those 50,000 students might never have gotten the help they needed. My own transformation, my own growth, my own journey to becoming a better person, it might never have happened. And I would have gone on thinking I was a good person, a fair person, an unprejudiced person, completely blind to the ways I was letting my biases harm others and diminish myself. That terrifies me. It terrifies me that I came so close to failing. It terrifies me that there are probably other times I have failed, other people I have dismissed or underestimated, other opportunities I have missed to support someone remarkable because I couldn't see past my assumptions. But it also gives me hope. Because if I could change, if I could grow, if I could overcome my prejudices and become better, then anyone can. All of us can. We just have to want to. We just have to try. We just have to remember that the person in front of us is exactly that. A person with dreams and struggles and potential and worth that has nothing to do with their appearance and everything to do with who they are inside. So I challenge you. I challenge you to pay attention to your own assumptions and prejudices. I challenge you to notice when you're making quick judgments about people. I challenge you to actively fight against the instinct to categorize and dismiss. I challenge you to see every person you encounter as someone worthy of respect and dignity. And I challenge you to recognize that you have power. Whether you realize it or not, you have the power to open doors or close them. You have the power to encourage dreams or crush them. You have the power to see people or overlook them. What will you do with that power? How will you use it? What kind of world will you create with the daily choices you make about how to treat the people around you? Have you ever judged someone and later realized you were completely wrong? Have you ever been on the receiving end of unfair prejudice? Share your experiences in the comments below, because these conversations matter, these stories matter, these reminders that we're all human and all deserving of dignity and respect, they matter more than we realize. If this story touched your heart, if it made you think differently about the people you encounter, if it challenged you to examine your own biases and assumptions, please leave a like on this video. Your engagement helps this message reach more people, helps spread the reminder that we need to see people, really see them, not just their appearances or circumstances. And please subscribe to Through My Eyes for more stories that challenge us to be better, to see more clearly, to live more compassionately. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that might change how you see the world and the people in it, because that's what these stories are for. They're not entertainment, though I hope they're engaging. They're not just content to fill your feed, though I hope you find them compelling. They're reminders of our shared humanity, of our capacity for growth, of our responsibility to treat each other with dignity and respect, regardless of how different we might seem on the surface. That young man with torn shoes taught me more about success, about character, about what really matters than any business book or professional training ever did. He taught me that brilliance wears many faces, that potential comes from places we don't expect, that our job as human beings is to see each other clearly and treat each other kindly. Years have passed since that Tuesday morning when a kid in torn shoes walked into my bank. I'm still a bank manager, still working with businesses and entrepreneurs, still doing the practical daily work of banking. But everything is different now. I'm different now. And every time someone walks through the door who doesn't fit the usual profile, every time I'm tempted to make a quick judgment, every time I catch myself seeing appearances instead of people, I remember. I remember torn shoes and brilliant minds. I remember how close I came to failing. I remember that every person matters, every story matters, every opportunity to treat someone with dignity and respect matters. That's the lesson. That's the change. That's what I want you to remember long after you've finished watching this video. See people. Really see them. Because you never know who might walk through your door, who might cross your path, who might be waiting for just one person to look past their circumstances and see their potential. Be that person. Be the one who sees. Be the one who believes. Be the one who opens doors instead of closing them. Be the one who makes the difference. Because that difference, that simple choice to see people clearly and treat them with dignity, it doesn't just change their lives. It changes yours too. It makes you better, kinder, more compassionate, more human. And that's worth more than any professional success, any material achievement, any superficial marker of importance. That's what truly matters. That's what lasts. That's the legacy worth leaving. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being willing to examine your own biases and assumptions. Thank you for being part of the solution, part of the movement toward a world where everyone is seen, everyone is valued, everyone is given the chance to show what they're capable of achieving. Now go out there and see people. Really see them. You might be amazed by what you discover.